sleep.
Hey guys, welcome back to Movie Reviews. Today I'm reviewing the newest interpretation of a story that has been told for well over 3,000 years, The Odyssey, directed by Christopher Nolan. As Odysseus himself, we have a very well-known actor who is always associated with Christopher Nolan, Matt Damon. As his wife Penelope, we have Anne Hathaway, another person that's always seems to be right there with Christopher Nolan. As their son Telemachus, we have Tom Holland. As the goddess Athena, we have Tom Holland's wife, Zendaya. And as Circe, we have Charlize Theron. As Menelaus, the king of Sparta, we have the Punisher himself, Jon Bernthal. As Helen of Troy, we have Lupita Nyong'o. As the blind swineherder Eumenes, we have John Leguizamo. And as Sinan, who, while is technically not in the original Odyssey, he's technically in the Aeneid, which is basically the story of how Rome was founded, which is also somewhat associated with the Trojan War and the Iliad. But either way, as Sinan, we have Elliot Page. So yeah, I'm sure all of us at some point have read or heard about the Odyssey or the Iliad. Basically, the basic synopsis of it is basically the Iliad is about how the gods, they cause Helen of Troy to be taken by the Trojans. Basically, the Trojans, this is basically what is now Western Turkey, and by the Achaeans, who are basically ancient Greece during the Bronze Age. So basically all the Greeks, they fight Troy for 10 years to get Helen back. They succeed.
We won the war.
Helen is returned back to her husband Menelaus. And then, the Odyssey basically takes place after. It's about basically the story of Odysseus, who is the king of Ithaca, on his way home, returning after the success of the Trojan War. And Odysseus, if you don't know, he basically is the one that thought up of the Trojan horse, which is what basically worked. Is basically how the Greeks, they won the Trojan War by basically hiding inside. And then when the Trojans brought the horse in, the Greeks, they snuck out of it, and then they completely took over Troy, and then they saved Helen. And so basically the movie starts off right as the Trojans discover the Trojan horse, and Sinan is immediately killed. And basically then it flashes back to, flashes forward to Ithaca, where basically, in Odysseus' time away, basically it's been 20 years since him and all of his men left Ithaca for the Trojan War. So basically, Telemachus, who is his son, really has never met him. Penelope just wishes that her husband would return, but unfortunately, throughout all these years that Odysseus has been away, their entire kingdom has pretty much been overrun by suitors, a bunch of young guys that want to take over and become king and then marry Penelope.
This is a household waiting for master. I want you to choose me.
Ithaca's king is coming back.
No, he's not.
And both Penelope, Telemachus, and also their faithful swine herder, or pig herder, Eumenes, John Leguizamo's character, they're all hoping that Odysseus will return.
What would he do if he came back here and find all these suitors in his house?
They're pining for a daddy. You didn't even know. Like some sniveling bastard.
And the lead suitor, played by Robert Pattinson, and Ananias, he's kind of the main quote unquote villain. He's like the main suitor that's really wanting to have Penelope for himself and rule Ithaca. And it's funny seeing him as a villain, since we're so used to seeing him, or we are so used to seeing him as Batman, and we're still awaiting the sequel to that. Or actually, no, I should say he's not Batman, he's Vengeance.
I'm vengeance.
But yeah, so basically, as all this is happening, Telemachus, who's now 20 years old, he really wants to find out where his father is, like, and just to see, has anyone heard about Odysseus? So he sneaks away to go to Sparta to try to talk to Menelaus and Helen, just to try to see if they know anything about where Odysseus is. So Telemachus, he goes to Sparta, and he meets Helen and Menelaus. And while they do know of Odysseus, they know that he was the genius that made the Trojan horse. They have not heard about him. Like, they have not seen him since Troy. So yeah, that's it. But then we flash to Odysseus, who is washed up on the nymph Calypsos, who is played by Charlize Theron, who looks really just disheveled and broken, and he then starts to tell Calypso about pretty much everything that he's been through. So just as the Trojan War ends, him and his men, they leave to return back to Ithaca. They first sack a town, the Circones, who were loyal to Troy. They pilfer and plunder, just basically what pirates do. And as they make their way back to Ithaca, they then find a island where basically they go in, they find a cave, try to find some shelter. And this place, it is basically the home of the Cyclops, the famous creature from Greek mythology, one-eyed creature, Cyclops, Cyclopses, I think that's the plural term. And his name is Polemachus, and this thing is a giant compared to Odysseus and his men. Like, I mean, I don't know how tall, like, I know people were a little bit shorter back then, but like, this thing is like well over like 10 foot tall. And funny enough, when as soon as like they see it, it sees them, it just casually just eats his men, like they're basically just like potato chips. Like, he's just casually eating them, as like, just, he doesn't even like consider them a threat. Basically, Odysseus devises the plan for them to hide under sheep in order for them all to eventually escape. And in the process of as them trying to escape, that Odysseus, he actually blinds the creature. Which this ends up being a very bad decision on his part, due to the fact that basically the Cyclops is Poseidon's son. Now, Poseidon in Greek mythology, he is the god of the oceans, so you really don't want to upset Poseidon if you're sailing. And for those of you, if you're a little bit confused, Poseidon, he's also known as Neptune for all Rome. And, you know, you don't want to upset either of whatever name you want to call them because, you know, you
He's king of the sea.
kind of runs the oceans. So, yeah. This all is a bad decision because now Poseidon is very pissed off and he basically keeps preventing Odysseus and his crew from making it back home. They continue forward. Now, in the original poem, they actually run into the god Aeolus, who gets a bag of winds for them to make their way back to Ithaca. And this works until eventually it doesn't work, and it actually blows them off course completely. And then they continue forward where they run into what is known as the last Dragonians, who are basically these giant, like, I'm gonna say, like, just giant cannibalistic, like, I don't even know if they're considered humans or they're just like, I don't even know. I don't know what they were considered, if they were humans or if they were just like giants. I don't know. But yeah, they completely destroy Odysseus and his men, and they actually destroy most of his ships. The only ship that actually makes it off their land is Odysseus's ship. So 11 of his 12 ships are completely destroyed. The last remaining ship, they then go to another island where they run into Circe, who is basically a witch, or I believe she's a goddess and a witch at the same time, if I'm remembering correctly. Basically, she turns Odysseus' men into pigs, and Odysseus actually has to convince her to try to change them back. And she does. And in the poem, him and Odysseus and her, they actually do like spend a good while together. They spend about a year together. Whereas in the movie, this is kind of just maybe they spend like a night or two and then they leave. And Circe basically also tells Odysseus what he needs to do in order to try to actually make it home to Ithaca. He needs to go to meet Hades, who is the brother of Poseidon and also Zeus, and to try to make peace. So he goes off to the land of the dead, both in the movie and in the original poem. Him and his men, they communicate with the dead, whereas in the movie at least, he runs into Sinon and also Agamemnon, and Sinon basically is very upset that they basically sacrificed him in order to win the Trojan War. And he also lets him know that Antonius actually tricked him into going to war as opposed to Antonius. And he also runs into Agamemnon, who is basically Agamemnon. He's the brother of Menelaus, and he's Helen of Troy's sister and brother-in-law. And he basically also tells him to watch out when he goes home, because basically his own wife killed him as revenge for basically sacrificing their daughter to the gods. So, you know, he warns Odysseus, and he also finds out that basically all of his men are going to die, that he is going to be the only one of his crew to make it back home, just due to the fact that soon after this they are going to encounter two monsters, Scylla and I believe Sharius, or it's basically one is like a giant whirlpool and the other is just like a giant six-headed creature. It's kind of like, I guess, like a Hydra monster. And then after that, they are going to go onto an island, and then they are going to kill the sun god's cattle, which will upset them. And then as a result, they are all going to die except Odysseus. So basically, and as well, they also will run into the sirens as well, which are basically mermaids that sing and then they make sailors want to kill themselves. So all of this happens, by the way, And also a little difference in the epic poem, I believe Odysseus, he doesn't meet Sinon or even Agamemnon. I think he meets Hercules, and I believe he also meets Achilles. So that's just a little difference, the two differences. And so anyway, all this happens despite Odysseus trying his best to make sure his crew survives, but all this just does not happen. It all falls apart. Odysseus then ends up shipwrecked on Calypso's island, where basically this is where they meet. And turns out that Calypso, being in love with him, has basically kept him prisoner on the island for 7 years. So yeah, all this time he's just been, a prisoner. And finally, Calypso, with the help of Athena, basically convincing her to let him go, she lets Odysseus go. He makes a bit of he makes like a crude raft, and basically kind of surrenders himself to Poseidon. And this pretty much makes peace for what has transpired. In the original poem, he basically escapes Calypso, goes to like a neighboring kingdom, and he ends up telling the leaders, the king of that kingdom, like his whole story, and then finding out about everything, then they actually set up a boat for him to go to Ithaca. But either way, he makes his way to Ithaca. He actually runs into Eumenes, and no one recognizes him. Like, none of these people recognize him. Now, again, a lot of them would not recognize him because it's been 20 years since he's been home. But, he just looks very disheveled and unrecognizable, even to Eumenes, although then again, Eumenes is blind, so it's not like he'd be able to tell anyway. But basically, Eumenes kind of tells him what happened with the suitors and Penelope and Telemachus, that Telemachus might be killed in Sparta. And it's interesting because here in the epic poem, Athena basically disguises Odysseus, like using her powers, basically disguises him as like a beggar, whereas here he just looks so disheveled that nobody recognizes him. So Odysseus, he goes to Sparta to save, he goes to Pylos, which is right near Sparta, to save Telemachus from basically the suitors. They sent out a bunch of assassins to try to kill Telemachus, so that basically that no one would be able to stand in their way between them and Penelope. But Odysseus is able to kill the suitors along with Telemachus. They both make their way back to Ithaca, where Odysseus, he actually basically, just like in the poem, a few people actually do start to recognize him. And basically, as Odysseus makes his way into his home, his dog, who had been alive for 20 years, which for a dog, that's incredible. Basically, his dog recognizes that his master is back, and then finally dies peacefully. And then Odysseus, he just sees what these suitors are doing. They're just making a mockery of his kingdom, and they are also disrespecting Zeus's law, which basically Zeus's law, at least at the time, it was basically the idea that you treat guests as you would want to be treated. I mean, even though Christianity itself did not really exist yet, or really any religions that we really know of today. But basically, that was just what the Greeks believed in. So basically, they pretty much mistreat Odysseus. The suitors, they mistreat Odysseus because they don't know who he is. They treat him terribly, and they are just making a mockery of his kingdom. And Odysseus actually, with his disguise, talks to Penelope and kind of teases the idea that Odysseus is alive. He doesn't reveal himself yet. And one of his servants, his maids, actually recognizes him by noticing a scar on his leg, which is also similar to what happened in the original source material. So basically, Penelope, she announces that she finally is going to choose someone to marry in the morning. Basically, what will happen is any man will come in. They will have to try to string a bow and then shoot with it. Basically, it's a bow that only Odysseus would be able to do. So she basically wants to see if there's any man that can stack up to Odysseus or compare to him, then she will marry him. So all the suitors, they try to do it, they fail. And in the meantime, Telemachus hides all the suitors' weapons. And then Odysseus, in his disguise, does it. He strings the bow and fires with it. And then right as the suitors realize, like, oh shit, it's Odysseus himself, Odysseus just kills them all with Telemachus. And then finally, Penelope sees that it truly is Odysseus, and that her husband has finally returned after 20 years. And yeah, so the movie ends with a bit differently from how the epic poem ended. Basically, the epic poem ended with Athena basically making peace with all the suitors' families, because they rightfully are very pissed off that their sons are dead. And basically, then Odysseus makes his pledge by sailing west to appease Poseidon and also reuniting with his father. Whereas in the movie, Telemachus actually becomes king of Ithaca, and both Penelope and Odysseus, they basically self-exile themselves and sail west. Well, one, to honor his fallen soldiers, but also to basically that's also what basically they just feel like it's best for them to escape. And it's funny because sailing west at this point, this technically would have taken place probably around like maybe I think like 1200 BC. So at that time, Rome would not really be around, and Carthage wouldn't be around either. I mean, they maybe would have run into the Phoenicians or the Etruscans, which were basically the predecessors for Rome. But like, yeah, you know, I'm just wondering if this is like a tease to, you know, is this like a tease that Christopher Nolan's going to be making the Aeneid next or something? But yeah, so basically this that's how it ends. And also, as like the movie pretty much ends, it also like Penelope and Odysseus basically describe how like they're basically going to be they basically are like, he basically predicts that like Greek civilization is about to collapse, which is actually what happens at the time. The late Bronze Age collapse, where basically at the time, like pretty much from like 1100 BC to 800 BC, ancient Greece, the Hittite Empire, the Assyrians, and also the new kingdom of Egypt pretty much all collapsed, like briefly, and it just took, you know, about 300 years for them to recover, at least for Greece. And Egypt kind of did recover, but they never really did, or they never really were truly independent again until, well, pretty much like, you know, last century. But like Greece, you know, after like 800, that's when, you know, the famous Spartans and Athens really came about. That's where democracy came from. And then eventually, you know, the Persian War happened, and you know
This is Sparta!
the famous scene that this is Sparta all happened, and then all eventually leading to Alexander the Great. I was curious if they were like gonna tease like something again, if they were like gonna tease something like maybe, oh, like Christopher Nolan's gonna make like, you know, 300 or another version of the Persian War, or you know, or Alexander the Great. But well, you know, didn't happen. At the very least, this ending, unlike Oppenheimer, did not freak me out. Because, you know, that, you know, the Bronze Age collapse kind of already happened. Like, I missed it by about, like, you know, 3,000 years. So, yeah, that ends the Odyssey. All in all, despite quite a few controversies, this movie was really good. Like, you know, as per usual, Christopher Nolan knows how to make a movie. big surprise. Matt Damon really did amazing as Odysseus. Same thing with Anne Hathaway and Tom Holland. Like, I would say all the actors really did good with their characters. And, I mean, yeah, like, all in all, they really did amazing with their characters. Like, they really did, acted the part. I will say, although I am also, like, a little bit annoyed because, the controversies I do kind of agree with, like, and look, I got nothing against Lupita Nyong'o. I know she's just an actress, this is a part, but, this is technically a Greek story, so, and I'm pretty sure, there would be no, like, especially not Helen of Troy, she would not be, a black woman, like, just saying, like, I got nothing against her as a person, it's just, I feel like if we're gonna be somewhat accurate, it would have been a Greek actress, and also, like, I will say there also wasn't that many actual Greek actors or actresses, like there were a lot of, like, big names, but, like, come on, at least you could have gotten some, like, actual Greek actors and actresses. It is an ancient Greek story after all, and it's funny because, like, John Leguizamo, he famously always complains about, like, how, like, about, like, representation for, like, Latino or Latina, like, representation in films, yet he's, a Latino actor playing a Greek man. I gotta say, it's a little, fun.
I don't know, Mike. To me, it sounds a little, how you say, phony?
Funny, in my opinion. But, yeah, and I will say also, like, with, Helen of Troy and also Sinan, who was played by Elliot Page, no, Elliot Page did not play Achilles, like, what we all thought, which was funny, but, like, both, like, Lupita Nyong'o and Elliot Page, both of them, I'd say, were on screen for, like, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. So, like, if that's, like, at all a reason why you would not watch a movie, like, it's only about 5 minutes of a 3-hour movie. And, I mean, after all, like, once again, I have no issue with Elliot Page, but, it's just interesting. And also, I mean, I gotta say, like, the thing I know Elliot Page from most is, the X-Men Last Stand. But I don't really think about Elliot Page back in that scene. I just think of Juggernaut. But
Don't you know who I am? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
What do I know? But yeah, like, if you also have an issue with, like, trans, I guess technically, yeah, because she was a girl, now she's a guy, I guess a trans man being a Greek soldier, like, I know technically that didn't exist at the time, but, I think everyone knows the ancient Greeks, they were into some very interesting, sinful things, like, you can ask St. Paul about it. Look into like, the New Testament. You can see the Greeks were into some weird, interesting things back then. Like, but kind of everyone was at the time. This was like pre-Christianity, pre-Islam, this was pagan times. Like, everyone was into some very foreign things to the world today. But, yeah, all in all, I would give this movie a solid A. Like, go see it. Like, as per usual, like, it looks visually amazing. The actors did amazing. If you can get past the controversy, then, check it out. But yeah, so let's talk about the next movie that we are going to be reviewing. I'm going to give you a hint. It also stars Tom Holland, Zendaya, and John Bernthal. And it's a Marvel movie. Here's the trailer.
And for those spiders who make it through, it amounts to a kind of rebirth.
So yeah, the next movie is Spider-Man Brand New Day. So let's see what has happened with Spider-Man after, you know, he made the whole world forget about him. So yeah, tell me, what did you guys think of the Odyssey? Did you like it? Did you not even really see it? Did you care about the controversies or not? And yeah, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time. Goodbye.
It's over.
Honey, the gods.